Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch 2020, our show following all the news and rumors on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series. I'm Daemon Hatfield, and as always, I'm joined by Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox Podcast Unlocked.
Hey, Daemon.
Hello there. And Jonathon Dornbush, host of IGN's PlayStation Podcast Beyond.
Beyond. Hey, Daemon.
And this week, we'll be discussing some of the hidden costs of next-gen gaming. We've got some news on the next-gen consoles coming a little bit further down the road. But we begin with the Xbox Series X that Ryan has in his home, and he's been putting through the paces this week. Ryan, it's pretty cool that Microsoft shared an actual working Xbox Series X with you this far in advance of its launch.
Yeah, no, it's great. This, to be clear, this is a preview unit that Microsoft tells me it's not quite final. Like, it runs all my games, all my existing Xbox One, and then the compatible 360 and original Xbox games. But yeah, they say it's not quite like a final retail kit. And in fact, on the back, it's the production date is, from earlier this year. So it is like an internal, I guess, prototype type thing of sorts. But anyway, it works and it runs. And I have to say, the sort of immediate takeaways are, it feels very premium in your hand. Like I love the look of it, particularly in the vertical orientation, which is how I've got it back there. I think it's very like bold and confident, sort of standing up in the entertainment center. And it's got some heft to it. Like it is, the Xbox One X is a pretty like dense console. And I say that in a complimentary way. Like wow, they've packed a lot of tech into this little thing. And it's the same thing with the Series X. Like there is a lot going on inside and you can really feel that heft, but it's, so it definitely feels like an awesome $500 thing. And then when you turn it on, you cannot hear it. It is, Xbox, to their credit, the more recent revisions of the Xbox consoles have been pretty quiet. I mean, even the original larger Xbox One was pretty quiet. And then certainly the S and the X are quiet. This seems quieter. I have not been able to get it to make any audible noise yet. But to be fair, I don't have any new Series X next gen games to throw at it just yet. I've just been testing some existing compatible games. But I did the side by side of Red Dead Redemption 2 on the One X, and you can hear the fans kick up, and it's using the full GPU load of the Xbox One X. Same game running on the 12 teraflop Series X, quiet as a mouse. It really bodes well for the just build quality and acoustics of this thing. Very impressed by that side of it so far.
I think a lot of people are interested to hear about the loading times, which all along, both Microsoft and Sony have been promising are going to be much, much faster in the next-gen consoles.
Yeah, they the promise seems to not be a hollow one. And given that Sony's using similar technology, I'm sure theirs is going to be great too, based on this, because the quick resume and the speedy loading times, not a joke. Like they were definitely serious. I threw a kind of a mix of games at it. GTA 4 as an old backwards compatible 360 game. And then I had, I grabbed Fallout 4 off my shelf. I grabbed Control as a more recent game, IGN's 2019 Game of the Year. I grabbed the aforementioned Red Dead Redemption 2 as something just everybody's playing and really pushes the last gen console to its limits. And then Halo 5 as well as a first party, and State of Decay. That was the other one. So kind of a mix of stuff, open world and action and some just different things. And yeah, the SSD loading times here on the Series X, it ranges from a noticeable improvement to a night and day improvement. So there was no test I threw at it where it was like, barely noticeably better. It was noticeably better to, wow, that was like completely way faster. And that being Red Dead 2, because as you guys know, when you get into the world, the game just plays. There aren't any loading times, but it takes forever to load into the game. Mm-hmm. But on the Series X, it is remarkably faster. So these hard drives, these SSDs in these consoles are for real, which is great to see. It's just immediate quality of life improvement there.
That's very exciting to hear. Now let's take a look at the PlayStation 5 Jonathan has in his home.
It's in fact so quiet. I don't even know where it is because it's not here. We unfortunately don't have one. Yeah.
Yeah. In all seriousness, does it mean anything to you, Jonathan, that Microsoft seems so confident in their product that they're able to share it with Ryan this early, but no one, not at least us, don't have a PlayStation 5 yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a bummer, especially knowing that there's, a next-gen console in Ryan's house, and I still have my PS4 Pros fans kicking up a dust storm every time I turn it on. But it's not shocking, I would say, because sort of like, as we've kind of said all year, Xbox is the one that has to prove things that they just haven't been ahead this generation. And so it makes a lot of sense that we have seen, over communication about them from things, a lot more showcase-esque formats and things than we've seen from Sony this year. I think more direct discussions both with the press and both with consumers as well. They're definitely trying to prove to you why, hey, even if you went with the PS4 this last generation, here are all of the arguments about why the Series X may make sense for you, either as your primary or the Series S as a secondary console. So it totally makes sense to me. That said, I sure wouldn't mind if Sony decided they wanted to send a PS5 my way too.
I'm sure you would not. Earlier this week, we put out a call for anybody in our audience who has questions for Ryan about the Xbox Series X. Let's try to answer a few of those questions now. Our first one comes from Mark Murphy.
Hi folks, my name's Mark, all the way from the UK. Just wanted to say, I actually had the pleasure of meeting both Daemon and Ryan back in 2016 at a PAX East event, so hello again from me. What I want to know today is, with the Series X internal SSD and an external hard drive, just how quick is it on average to transfer games from one to the other? A big issue that I've had with the Xbox One this generation is just not having enough storage space, so I've made sure that I've now got an external hard drive specifically for the Series X. But how quick is it going to be on average for each game?
Mark, I'm glad you brought this up. This is an excellent question, and this is something I learned very quickly. So in setting up the Series X, I did not think ahead, and I just immediately started downloading stuff, re-downloading the things I owned, and I blew past my internet bandwidth cap, which that was a fun email to get. So it's using an external hard drive is probably the way to go as far as, you can use it as a pack mule, basically, you could store your next gen games on it. You cannot play next gen games off of an external USB hard drive, but you can keep them there until you want them back on the 1 terabyte SSD if you're buying the Series X, and then you've got the 512 SSD if you're getting the Series S. So and to answer the question about transferring, let's see, I'm trying to remember, maybe like call it a 40 gig game, I think took 6 or 7 minutes, something like that. Like, it's a heck of a lot quicker than downloading it. I will add one other potentially helpful tip for people. If you're upgrading from an Xbox One of any sort, you'll have them both on your network. They'll plug them both into your router. And the Xboxes have network transfer built into them. So as long as you enable that in the settings of both Xboxes, which I did here as I learned later, just check that on, and then it'll see the other console on your network. And it's pretty quick to transfer over your home network. And obviously, in that case, it's not using any bandwidth from your ISP, nor do you have to bother, unplugging and plugging a hard drive back in. Not that that's that difficult. So I think either one of those will be a good option. But yeah, use the external drive as a pack mule for your next gen games that you're not actively playing, and because transferring them around is pretty quick.
And we will be talking a little bit more about the storage on the Xbox Series X a little bit later in the show. But first, let's answer another question. This one is from Timothy.
Hey, IGN. I was curious if you noticed whether or not having it vertical versus horizontal, if it's louder or runs hotter.
Interesting question. Yeah, it's definitely doesn't affect the thermal. I mean, as long as you want to have good space around it, whether it's stood up or laid down, to be able to exhaust the hot air. But it definitely doesn't make a difference thermally, and I couldn't detect any difference noise-wise either. I mean, it's still it's still bringing in air through the bottom of the console, even if it's laying down. It's pulling in air that way and blasting it out through the top. So seems to be the same either way.
I feel like it's intended to be upright. Would you agree, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, given that that's how they've always shown it. There is a non-removable round rubber-edged base stand on the bottom, which you can't see behind me, but you can see in pictures on IGN. So it's definitely intended to be stood up, particularly given the fact that that bottom round stand is not removable, as confirmed by Microsoft. So you'll have that on the side if you're laying it down, but just purely subjectively, personally, I'm not going to get up now, but I don't think it looks that good laid down. Whereas I just got done saying how I think it actually looks great when it's stood up. It just kind of has a fireplace log look to it if you lay it down, but I really do think it looks pretty awesome standing up if it fits in your entertainment center that way.
Yeah. Okay, one more question. This one's from Five Sided Square.
So I was wondering about the Xbox Series X. When you do backwards compatibility, is there any updates that have to be done? Is there the original boot screen from the console? I was just wondering because I was thinking about getting one next year since I am collecting a bunch of old games. Thank you.
Great question there. Yes, the backwards compatible games perform exactly like the way they work is exactly the same way that they do on the Xbox One now. If you're playing a 360 game, you'll have to apply any updates. It will kick in the Xbox 360 splash screen if you're playing a 360 game. And yeah, you do have to any updates that the game has had, you'll need to apply them before you fire it up on the Series X as well.
Very cool. Thank you, Ryan. Before we get into talking about some of the hidden costs of next gen, this week Phil Spencer did confirm that the Xbox Series is not going to be Microsoft's final console. They are still thinking about future consoles and other hardware. This is, of course, years out. This generation lasted 7 years, so we're years away from any other Xbox consoles or hardware. But Ryan, is this surprising to you in a world where game streaming seems to be becoming more and more viable? Microsoft itself has its own xCloud platform.
No, not a surprise yet. I'm not worried about the death of the set-top box console for a while because, I mean, we need better internet overall for streaming of all kinds around the world, certainly in the United States as well. 5G is starting to roll out now, and it's pretty darn fast by all accounts. So that'll be standard by the time the next Xbox generation that Phil Spencer's alluding to there comes out. So yeah, maybe the next one that he's talking about could be the last, but there's still bandwidth, there's still data caps, there's a lot of considerations. There's still plenty of people that don't have super high fast internet around the world and the United States. So it's tough to predict that far out. I mean, like you said, this is going to be another 5 to 7 years, and the world can change a lot in that time. Technology moves really quickly in that time. But yeah, it's maybe next time I'll start to wonder if Phil will say that again in 5 to 7 years.
Jonathan, how about you? Do you feel confident there will be a PlayStation 6 box that you put next to your TV?
I can barely think about games coming out in 7 days, let alone 7 years from now. But I do think we will see a PlayStation 6. I don't think they're going to break the norm with that. And especially with the way, to Ryan's point, internet, obviously, high-speed internet and especially really, really fast capable internet for streaming, but let alone just for game downloads, isn't fully available throughout the world. And, we are still getting consoles that are digital offerings as well as disc-based offerings. And so, physical media is not dead there. And I still think we're going to have consoles when it comes to the next generation. But 7 years is a long time from now. A lot can happen then. So who knows what happens after that?
That's exactly right. Ryan, the Xbox Series X comes with a 1 terabyte hard drive, but because of system software that takes up some of that space, you end up with, is it 802 usable gigs to store your games?
Correct. Yes, indeed.
And was that a surprise to you? Some people seem a little bit disappointed by that discovery.
I think it was actually a little less than than the Xbox One or the One X. So it's about par for the course these days. I expect Sony will. I mean, granted, they have obviously a completely different operating system, but I really doubt all 880 gigs of their drive will be available either. It's just a question of how much will be available to the user. So it's, and even when you just buy a hard drive, if you buy a 2 terabyte hard drive, I think you only get like 1.8 or something, 1.9 usable space. There's always just that weird thing with hard drives. So yeah, it's something to be aware of, something to kind of just have in the back of your mind and plan for. But yeah, you've got to have an operating system.
Yeah. Well, Microsoft is offering its own official expandable storage drive, but it is $220, and that's, of course, on top of the $500 you've already spent for the Series X. You don't have to use the official drive, but it's the one you want to use to take advantage of the speed of the SSD. So how are you feeling about that, Ryan? Does this feel like it's too much of an extra cost? Should the Series X have shipped with more space for games?
I mean, I'm sure Microsoft would have liked to, but they were trying to sell a $500 console, not a $600 console. And the reality is the price of, if you look at not just this 1 terabyte expansion card for the Series X, but you look at NVMe SSD hard drives on PC, it's just expensive tech right now. It will get cheaper over time. So it's expensive. It's also the going rate. So I've seen a lot of kind of arguing about that online of like, it's expensive, but oh, well, that's how it is. I'm like, well, it's still expensive. It's still a lot of money. So that's what I was saying earlier in the show, responding to that fan question. I think a definite more affordable way to go is to use an external USB 3.1 hard drive. You may already have one. I mean, I've got one sitting on top of I've been using one since the original Xbox One, and it's followed me to my Xbox One X. So you may already have one that you could just use, again, like a pack mule to store your games on it until you're ready to move them over to the SSD. Because, we just don't know. Games now are 80 gigs. Some of the big ones are 100 gigs. Even like, I think, what was the biggest one? Maybe it might have been GTA or it might have been Gears 5. Maybe both were a little over 100. I think Call of Duty Modern Warfare is right there too. So, you're talking about 8, 9, 10, maybe kind of a dozen games, depending on how large, the file sizes are. And obviously like indie games can be a lot smaller, but I would say if $220 is in your budget, great. Buy that expansion slot. If you want to just have double the space on your Xbox Series X console, and then don't worry about it, because then that expansion card works exactly like the internal SSD does. You get all the speed benefits. But if 220 is stretching your budget after buying the console this fall and any games and accessories, well, then maybe use a USB hard drive to carry around your games if needed.
And Jonathan, what approach is Sony taking with expandable storage, and have they announced an official solution?
Yeah, so Sony, there's still a lot unanswered about the PS5 and exact specifications on everything for storage and what will and won't work exactly. I think there's still a few details out there we still don't have. But way back when Mark Cerny was first talking about the SSD drive for the PS5 back in March, I believe it was, we essentially learned that the hard drive, the custom built SSD that's in there in the hard drive space and all of that is the 825 gigabyte base that you'll have. And Sony will allow third-party drives to be used with the PS5, but they have to match the specifications of that SSD. And those are not too commercially available, or if they, will be by launch, they're pretty expensive. I do believe there will be some functionality when it comes to transferring games off of a hard drive onto the installed drive. But yeah, that is where Sony is right now. They haven't announced any first-party additional drives as of yet, but we could very well see that. Sony is definitely no stranger to proprietary save drives, whether it's, memory cards all the way back in the day, or even things like the Pro Memory Stick Duo for the PSP, the Vita cards. There's definitely been a history of Sony first-party proprietary save states and save offerings, so I wouldn't be surprised if that comes, but they haven't announced it yet.
Got it. Okay, before we go, we have the results of last week's poll, which asked, after Microsoft's purchase of Bethesda, which got them series like Fallout, Elder Scrolls, Doom, and Wolfenstein, we asked which consoles are you most interested in owning. 41% said you want the PS5 Standard Edition, and 30%, nearly 31%, said Xbox Series X. And what's interesting about that is that was increased from an earlier poll we asked after we had the release date and price of both consoles, and we asked that now that all the cards are on the table, which we thought, which next-gen console will you purchase first? Back then, nearly 49% wanted the PS5 disc version, and only 25% wanted the Xbox Series X. And what's even more interesting is that back in that earlier poll, only 7.5% said they wanted both consoles, but now, after the announcement that Microsoft is purchasing Bethesda, the respondents who said they were looking for both consoles has doubled up to 15%. So, Ryan, I don't know, let's get your response first. It actually seems like that announcement was actually changing people's minds and opening up more minds to the possibility of purchasing an Xbox Series.
Yeah, it's as PS4 has shown us on its way to over 100 million consoles sold this generation, exclusives matter. So, yeah, I mean, you suddenly have Elder Scrolls, Fallout, Doom, Wolfenstein, etc., Starfield in your back pocket. People are going to come to your platform. So it's very interesting to see that this acquisition has already seemingly started to move the needle in people's minds.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot in recent weeks. Jonathan, realistically, do you see this, instead of sort of seeing people jump from PlayStation to Xbox, do you think it's more likely you'll see a lot of PlayStation owners decide to pick up an Xbox as their second console?
I think so, yeah, especially if every Bethesda franchise does become Xbox and PC exclusive, which seems to be the way it's going. I do think we're going to see people want to pick up both, because I do think as this generation goes on, we're going to see Sony make a play for more exclusives. You know, they already have with stuff like Final Fantasy 16 and some others. So even, you know, Bethesda published games like Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo. So I do think we're going to continue to see them try to acquire more exclusives, and that may make Microsoft respond in kind or really double down on this Bethesda acquisition, obviously. And so I do think it'll make sense, especially as the generation goes on. You know, this maybe came too late for some people to make day one purchase decision changes. But I do think as the years go on, we're going to see people gravitate toward having both, because you're going to need both to play the biggest games.
Sure. And finally, we have a poll for you to vote on for next week. We want to know, how much do you plan to spend this November on next-gen gaming? The entry point is going to be $300 for that Xbox Series S, $400 for the PS5 discless version, and of course, both the standard models of consoles are $500. You're expecting to go more? You want to double that and buy both PlayStation 5 disc version and Xbox Series X? Make sure you to vote at IGN.com, and we'll share the results with you on next week's episode. And that will do it for this week's episode of Next Gen Console Watch 2020. Thank you to Ryan and Jonathan. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern with more PS5 and Xbox Series news and rumors. We'll see you then.